Ladies and ladies and gentlemen, a 1-minute warning. So if you're at the bar, if you might make your way to your seats, the bar is going to, I'm reliably informed, going to remain open during the discussion, and you are able to go back to refresh your glasses if you so wish. But we'll begin in a minute's time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Hutchings. I'm the rector of St Mary's. It's really lovely to welcome you all here this evening, everybody in the audience, particularly our candidates, of course. It's great to have you here. We are holding here at St Mary's in association with all of the churches together in Barnes. The churches may not be party political, but politics is indeed a very serious and important part of life, and so it's great that this gathering is here this evening. It falls to me just to give some of the housekeeping announcements, so do please have your phones on silent. There are fire exit signs to either side here. There are fire exits there and through the way that you came in. So we always say here, in the unlikely event of a fire, but of course this is a church that had a catastrophic fire in 1978, so these things do happen. So those are the ways to exit in that event. Toilets can also be found through that door there. Also to say, do please keep a close eye on your bag, any valuables that you brought this evening, just to make sure that they're kept safe as well. So I'd like to say thank you to everybody who has done the setting up for this evening, particularly Mark, who's masterminded all the technology side of it. Just to say, if you wish to contribute something towards to defray the costs of the evening, there'll be an opportunity to do that on your way out later on. And I'd particularly, of course, like to say how pleased I am that we have such an adept and experienced broadcaster and journalist, Nick Gowing, to chair this evening. Thank you, and so over to you, Nick.
James, nothing has happened yet, and they're already clapping. This is of concern to me. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. Coming and making a decision not to watch the football, not to watch Question Time, not to go to the pub, not to sit in the garden having a glass of wine or beer, and coming here for this. What we're trying to do is really give you as much idea as to what the candidates are thinking in advance of this election. As you can see, there are only 4 candidates, and I need to explain that. We have approached the other 3. One runs a pub, Chris French, and he is representing the mitre in TW9. He has spent £1,000 to get nominated, but he's not here. Also, Richard Harrison from the SDP, he said he couldn't make it tonight, so he's not here. And Michael Hearn from Reform UK, we tried 3 times to communicate with Reform, and we didn't hear anything back. So if you're here, Michael Hearn, please tell me. Because we can create a 5th position. We're in the business of equality here. So I want you to realize that the other 4 are here because they've agreed to join us, and they want to share with you their views on a whole host of things. We're going to run between now, 7:35, and up to 9:15. If we run out of questions or run out of interest, or you want to rush off somewhere else and there's no one left here, we'll understand. But we have an enormous number of questions, and we'd like more from you as well. Now, before I go on, what I'd like to do is find out how many of you, this is an interesting psephological thing, how many of you actually have made up your mind about which way you're going to vote? How many of you are undecided? It's sort of 40 to 50%. So that's what you're playing for. There are 77,000 people who can vote in Richmond Park constituency, so you are obviously a small percentage. But there is obviously a lot to play for and a lot of minds to be persuaded. And I will ask those of you who are left at the end whether you've made up your mind or whether we've clarified for you what the issues are, what each candidate represents. Now, I should tell you that we have Laura Corrigan, who's from the Labour Party. We have Zara Ghazdari, who is from the Conservative Party, Sarah Olney from the Liberal Democrats, and Chas Warlow from the Green Party. And they've agreed to sit in that order. It hasn't been imposed on them. This has been done totally democratically. Once they saw where the signs were when they walked in. But they agreed to it, and there was no debate about it. Now, you will see you've got a bit of paper, or should have a bit of paper on where you were sitting. We've already got quite a few questions. Nothing's fixed, nothing's prescribed, everything is open. But a lot of people have actually already submitted stuff. If you still want to do that, please do, either on email or on SMS. And if you're going to send an SMS because you don't want to be seen, you don't want to be identified, if you do want to be identified, then on an SMS, put your name in it as well. Then we know who it's come from, and if necessary, I can go with a microphone. But the aim is as much to get microphones to all of you. Each of the candidates is going to speak for 3 minutes at the beginning. That means the first 12 minutes are sort of already spoken for. After then, it's a sort of free-for-all, and we have, I and my colleagues, my wife, and Jane Bennett-Powell, and Matt, and Henry as well, they are trying to make sure that we get as many voices from you as possible. And there are others watching online, so it's not just here in the church. So that's the basis on the way we're proceeding for the next hour and 40 minutes. And so let's get going. And first of all, Laura, I'd like you to take the first 3 minutes to explain your position from the Labour Party position.
Thank you very much. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Hi, my name is Laura, and thanks so much for joining us today. Now, here in Richmond, we face a lot of serious challenges. For example, over the last 5 years alone, we've seen energy bills increase by 59%, food bank visits increase from 137,000 to 384,000, 11% of children in this constituency live in poverty, 167,000 are homeless, and Hammersmith Bridge has still not been opened. We can do better than this, and we need change. I believe in getting things done. I've got a lot of things done over the last 10 years as a campaigner in my spare time. I started a petition against tampon tax. I don't know how many of you may have heard of it, but it's against the luxury tax rate applied to all period products, which 320,000 people signed, and it was supported by some really great figures like President Obama, as well as others across the world. Now, this petition, with everyone who signed it, ended up convincing government to start the tampon tax fund, through which nearly £100 million was donated to female-focused charities, and it changed UK and EU laws by ending the tax in 2021. And I could do so much more than that as your Labour MP. So vote in this election what you believe in. If you believe in a strong NHS, in bringing back family doctors, in mental health hubs in primary and secondary schools, in renationalising our railways, and in free breakfast clubs in primary schools so kids don't have to go through school hungry, then vote Labour. Vote for change, vote Labour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Sarah. It's working.
Is it working? Okay. Hello, good evening. My name is Sarah Ghazdari, and I'm the parliamentary Conservative candidate for Richmond Park in North Kingston. As a child, I was born in Albania under a communist regime, and I fled the country in 1997 during a civil war. I then lived in foster care in Italy for a couple of years before being reunited with my family. I know what it means to go without. I know what it means not to have democracy, freedom, or choices. But I love a special corner of London. I love Richmond Park. And I'm incredibly lucky as a single mother of two beautiful children, Eduardo and Sofia, to live here and to raise my family here. And I am here to make the difference. And that is because I believe in people. Because for me, this is about people and not politics. And I have listened to you. That is why your priorities are my priorities. And what I would like to do is make our streets safer, champion education, protect our beautiful green spaces, boost our local businesses, improve our transport links, but most of all, listen always to all of you, to my community. For too long, I've heard people talking to me about how they don't feel that they've got a strong voice on the green benches, and we need a strong voice. We might end up with a Labour government that will increase taxes, then we will need a strong opposition. And that is why I am here, to be your local candidate, your strong voice. Because as half Italian and half Albanian woman, you better believe that when I want, my voice can be very strong. Thank you. We're very lucky already here locally. We're incredibly lucky to live here in Richmond Park. But I want to make Richmond Park even a better place. And I hope that you'll see from this evening, from my answers, that I'm not here to talk about empty rhetoric. I'm not here to pay lip service for votes. With me, what you see is what you get. And that's passion, commitment, and consistency. And I want to do that by listening to you and standing up for you with conviction and integrity. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you. Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name's Sarah Olney. I'm standing for the Liberal Democrats here in Richmond Park. I've been the MP for the last 4.5 years, and it's been the greatest privilege of my life to be your representative. During my time in office, we've had the pandemic, the invasion of Ukraine, the crisis in Gaza. These have all sent shockwaves through Britain. But every time the world has changed, I've seen our community here in Barnes and across Richmond Park rise up to the challenge. We checked up on our neighbours, we've opened our homes to refugees, and we've stood up for what we believed in. And that refusal to stand by and watch others struggle is something I have always tried to exemplify as your MP. When residents told me they didn't feel safe walking the streets at night, I worked with police in both Richmond and Kingston to bring more officers to our community. When Hammersmith Bridge closed, I spent the next 4 years refusing to let the government quietly abandon the commitment they made to the public to fix the bridge. And when Heathrow tried to put thousands more planes into the sky above us, I worked with MPs from every party to block the third runway. As a Liberal Democrat, I'm often asked if we can really make a difference. But since 2019, our campaigning has changed the national conversation again and again. We were the first to call for a windfall tax on energy profits. We brought the sewage scandal into the public eye, and we were the first party in the UK to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. While we have been fighting to protect our constituents, Boris Johnson lied to the public, Liz Truss wrecked the economy, and Rishi Sunak has driven our public services into the ground. The Conservatives have driven this country to the brink of collapse. But in Richmond Park and in dozens of seats across the country, the Liberal Democrats are fighting to make sure that the Conservatives will not be rewarded for their failures. We're fighting for a better country, a country that is closer to Europe, that protects our most vulnerable, and that listens to our communities. And if you trust me to represent you for another 5 years, I will spend every day fighting for this community and for a fair deal for Britain. Thank you.
Hello, Barnes. I'm Chas Warlow. I am the Green Party candidate. Oops, I think I haven't blown that microphone. Whoops, that will cost something. That's not costed in our manifesto, by the way. But, I'm a Green Party councillor in Richmond. I was elected in 2022, and I'm extremely proud of being elected and all of the work that we've managed to do as members of the Green Group to push the Liberal Democrat Council to take on certain responsibilities like being a social housing provider, to support renters and to fight against pollution and to produce better sustainable transport plans. The Green Party stands for many things. Why vote Green? You need to vote with your heart in any election. I grew up believing that democracy was about voting for the party that you most liked rather than voting for the party that you least disliked. And I still believe that today, which is why we support proportional representation, of course. The country is in a massive state at the moment. There's pollution in our rivers, our seas, there's pollution, air pollution, poor air quality, and there's just a basic lack of leadership and lack of direction in this country. The Green Party has always stood up for what we believe in and what people really want. They want a future with hope for their children. They want their children to be able to afford housing. They want clean air. They want a future where the global situation has improved, both in terms of conflict and also in terms of climate. We know climate is a massive, massive issue, and nobody's talking about it apart from the Green Party. The Green Party is prepared to be honest with the electorate about these challenges and what is needed to overcome them in terms of public services, in terms of housing, in terms of climate action. We know that this will cost money, and it's not going to be easy. We're not lying to the public and pretending that somehow we can do this without really raising any revenue through taxation. And people might say, oh yeah, where are you going to get the money from to commit to your 50 billion initiatives on green energy, or 29 billion to retrofit and 50 billion to support the NHS? And I look, good questions. You should be asking those questions of everybody who claims that they will fund our public services properly. We know that this money will need to be raised from those with the broadest shoulders in our society. A wealth tax on assets of over 10 million will be a massive input into our budget so that we can cope with the challenges and the funding investments that we need to make. I've lived in Richmond Park, in this constituency, for 17 years, and my children have grown up here. They can't afford anywhere to live at the moment, even though they have decent jobs. This is not a sustainable situation. It's not a sustainable situation, what they're looking to in the future either. We must act urgently on all of these issues. Climate is key, obviously, but other issues too, public services. Please, use your vote wisely, vote with your heart, vote Green.
Right, I'm going to open it up pretty quickly. Is Caroline Hurd here in the audience? Or just online? Caroline, are you? Yeah, can we get the microphone to Caroline, please? And also to Fiona Smith. I'm going to come to you in a moment, but the first thing I want to ask you is why you want to become an MP. Because the National Centre for Social Research, Sir John Curtis, literally a few days ago said, confidence in the UK's politics and election system has never been worse. Quote, the public is as doubtful as it's ever been about the trustworthiness and efficacy of the country's system of government and the people who comprise it. I'd like to hear from each of you why you want to be an MP. A lot of MPs have simply stopped being MPs, have decided not to stand again because they can't stand it. Laura.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad that you asked this question. A lot of people have asked me a really similar thing. I was actually speaking to some students today as part of my 9 to 5, and they were saying the same thing. They're so disillusioned in politicians with all of the, Partygate and all of these scandals that we're having. People have even said to me, why do you want to become an MP? You can't have a family life and be a nice person and be a politician. And it's like, we shouldn't have to choose between all these things.
So what's your answer?
So I think we need to change the type of people that are attracted to politics. I want to become an MP because I've worked with some amazing Labour MPs to get tampon tax axed and to change the conversation about periods and lots of conversations specifically to do with women. And I want to pay that back. I want to be an MP to help champion other campaigners, other people's voices, and to continue to make the change in society that I really want to see.
Sarah.
I know what it means not to have democracy and freedom. I remember when I was a child and I used to sleep next to my mum and my brother, and and she will hold an AK-47 to protect her family. And I know as a child what it means not know what's going to happen in the future, or even if I was going to have a future. So I know how democracy, freedom, and the opportunity to have a choice is important for us. And we are incredibly lucky to live in this country, to have the opportunity to have that choice. One of the greatest things that has happened to me lately is being the candidate for Richmond, having the opportunity after everything that I have been through, all my journey, to say, resilience, I did it, I'm here to represent the country that has given me so much, to pay back and stand next to this wonderful woman, no offense, Charles, but have and influence the next generation and make sure that my daughter, my 2-year-old Sophia, wants one day to become part of the decision-making tables.
Sarah Olney.
Somebody here in the audience can tell me who it was who said this quote: "The only thing required for evil to flourish is that good people stand aside and do nothing." What was that, sorry?
Edmund Burke.
Thank you. I don't think evil is flourishing in our country, but there's no doubt that some of the institutions that we hold dear have been undermined. And it's so important that for those of us who believe in stability, prosperity, democracy, and the institutions that underpin them, stand up and fight for them if we see them under threat. And that ultimately is what brought me into politics and what made me first stand as an MP. And I can say for my 4.5 years as MP for Richmond Park, it has been an absolute privilege. There was absolutely no hesitation in my mind when I was asked if I would stand again. The ultimate privilege is to have been able to meet so many people that I would otherwise never have met, and speak to people and find out about their lives. And it's such an honour to represent the people of Richmond Park in Parliament. I do want to just reflect a little bit on my experience, just very, very briefly. Here in Richmond Park, I haven't found some of the aggression that I know has been directed towards other MPs. And I think that's very much a reflection of the community that we have here. So it absolutely is possible to stand up for what you believe in and to meet people who are prepared to challenge you in a respectful way and to find a platform on which you can speak freely. So I know it's possible here in Richmond Park, and I just want I want us to be able to set that benchmark for everywhere else in the UK and continue to be a beacon abroad.
Charles, why do you want to become an MP?
Because I think it's absolutely vital to have green voices in the room. You know, we change things where we get a chance to change things, and without us, the movement for sustainable living is just so much slower. Where we have got seats across many, many councils across the UK and in the London Assembly, we've punched above our weight. Another reason why I want to stand is because I think Greens do politics a bit differently. You know, we're looking to build consensus. We're not really into the kind of Punch and Judy show that seems to be the major way that politics happens, particularly at PMQs and Prime Minister's Question Time, it seems. That's the image that people see. They see this kind of adversarial, point-scoring approach, and I think that really turns people off, certainly turns me off. I want to do things differently.
Okay, but I need to keep pressing on trustworthiness, because that's where we're going, and that's what John Curtis and the National Centre for Social Research came up with. It was devastating data, much worse than he expected. And Denise Poulton here, trust in politicians on a national level is greatly diminished. How on a local level will you work to restore that trust, deliver on your manifesto promises, the kind of things you're going to be saying tonight, and make integrity a cornerstone of your tenure? Is that possible, or are you being too idealistic?
Yeah, that's absolutely possible. And, you know, my experience is working with Paula Sheriff, who's not currently an MP, but still, she really helped to kind of drive the tampon tax petition through Parliament. My experience working with her really made me believe in politicians and believe in the change that they can create. So I know it's possible, I've experienced it before, and I really want to continue that. Everything in the Labour Party manifesto had to pass 2 metrics before it got in that manifesto. Firstly, can we fund it? And secondly, can we deliver it? So we're definitely sure everything in that manifesto is deliverable, and we're going to be delivering it in the first 100 days of government, if not.
Restoring trust, Sarah.
Well,
Because your party has a problem at the moment. Many.
Well, you said, how are we going to do it locally, right? So I think that's a very important question, and I think that's exactly what we should be focusing on. My entire journey in Richmond Park, one of the reasons why I am standing today for Parliament is because of the community spirit in Richmond Park, is because of what Richmond Park represents, is about these Richmond Park values that so much, even Sarah, is trying to bring on the green benches. There is something special about this place. There is something that, it's almost like some sort of a passion and a love and an attachment to this place that you want to grow, you want to protect, and you want to conserve. My entire life locally has been giving as much as I can with 2 young children, giving back to the community, starting from the Essex House, being a volunteer at the vaccination centre while I was 9 months pregnant, but also with Ham and Petersham and the Ham Parade Market, then Kew Market, until I got kicked out because I was too political, so I couldn't continue, and everything else from the BCA to the Barnes Festival, the Children's Festival, everything about this community is special, and I will work incredibly hard to preserve and protect and make sure that we can...
I've just got to press you on me, but nevertheless, if you do become MP, you're one of 650, and you're entering a jungle, a pretty unpleasant jungle.
I have escaped a war. I think I can manage that.
Okay. Sarah Olney, you've been in that jungle for
Yes.
several years,
Yes.
and you want to go back to it.
I do. And actually, I'm actually quite pleased that this general election is occurring slightly earlier than we all thought it was going to be, because I think we're all desperate for a reset. I think we need to draw a line under the last 4.5 years. It's been a really, really difficult time for lots of different reasons. Obviously, the pandemic, the international situation. But I think the general kind of opinion now of Parliament and politicians has really plummeted. And that's quite distressing, not least because we don't ever want people to lose faith in the idea of our parliamentary democracy as being the principal way that we regulate and conduct ourselves and make decisions in this country. So that's why I'm really, really pleased. We've got this opportunity to have a reset. I think it'll be a very different Parliament when we come back. What I'm really looking forward to is hopefully there will be more Liberal Democrat MPs in Parliament, and that we can really play a role in holding people to account, in ensuring a better standard of debate, a better standard of conduct is what's really, really required. You asked, Nick, particularly about the local
That came from
element.
one of the
Yes.
audience here.
So I think, the way we make change happen, particularly in a parliamentary democracy, is you need numbers in Parliament. That's why I'm looking forward to there being more Liberal Democrat MPs, because we can have more impact. We can push our priorities much more effectively with numbers. But here in the constituency, you'll have just the one MP. And my commitment is to do what I've always tried to do throughout the last 4.5 years. It's to be accessible, it's to be responsive, it's to be visible. You can judge me on my record. That's what I've tried really, really hard to do throughout the last Parliament, and that's what I will continue to do, because I think that's the way that people can build trust in their local MP. Whether or not we agree politically or not, my door is always open for anybody who wants to come and talk to me.
Chaz, you in your, I'm picking up on trustworthiness, but just to build on that, you in your election literature talk about the need for, you're talking about politics of fear and distrust. You use that word, and the need for real hope and real change. Quickly in a minute, how do you believe you can establish a new level of trustworthiness among the political class who you would be joining as an MP?
Well, I think we already do have integrity, and we have a very strong reputation. Caroline Lucas, as the sole Green MP over the last 14 years, has built up a massively good reputation there, and I'm sure Sarah would agree with that, that she's stood for all of these these values of integrity, sticking to her word, sticking to the policies and ideas that are being promoted by her party, by the Green Party. And I think that in itself has shown that the Green Party has got that level of integrity. Actions speak louder than words, don't they? Essentially, if you can only build trust through delivering on your promises. And as Greens, we work exceptionally hard to do that, to do just that. And that is what we've done across councils in the UK that we've been elected to, and particularly in Richmond Council, we've stuck to our guns, and we have held the Liberal Democrat Council to account on its policies, saying, this is what you've put in your manifesto, your climate emergency strategy, your policies. We're looking at you and we're holding you to it. And we're not going to go back on any of those things. I'm not going to go back on any of those things. But like you said, its actions speak louder than words, don't they? You have to prove it. You have to actually do what you say you're going to do.
Thank you. All right, let's now move on to some of the other substantive questions, particularly on health and social care. Let's go immediately to Fiona Smith. You've got the microphone. And then I'll come to Stephen as well.
Yes, I do. My question is, what, if anything, will the parties represented here tonight do about the inadequate care system?
And Stephen Beard, you want to build on that? Have you got a microphone?
Yeah.
Can we have the second microphone here, Phil?
Given the continuing parlous state of the NHS and the provision of social care, why will none of the parties treat these as national issues and adopt an all-party approach to their solution? And why, when so many of the European health systems compare so favourably with our own, are we so unwilling to adopt their best practices, including their provision and funding methods?
Sarah.
You want me to start?
Sarah.
Oh,
first.
sorry.
The problem of our names
Yes.
now.
The inadequate care system and cross-party approach to it.
Yes, absolutely. I think somehow cross-party, we have recognized that there is an issue with NHS. We have to be honest and we have to be fair on NHS. We have faced an unprecedented crisis with NHS because of the pandemic. Every country has. We've inherited the waiting list in 2010 from the Labour government, but we've also been in something quite exceptional, which was something that we weren't expecting, a worldwide pandemic. And the reality is, since 2010, we have recruited over 46,000 new doctors and over 76,000 new nurses. We have worked incredibly hard. But we have to be fair and honest with people. There is much more to do. And that is why we have a long-term plan in order to do that.
But don't forget care as well. That's also part of the
Absolutely. Because what we need to do is we have to make sure that we manage the challenges that the NHS faces today, but also without forgetting the challenges that the NHS might face tomorrow. And that is why, for example, I'm so passionate about AI and how we can use AI to help the NHS. And we're already doing it by giving the first 10,000 virtual wards. And by what that means is giving the opportunity to patients to be in their own home, taking away the pressure from the hospitals and being treated in their own houses, monitored, and getting a community nurse and a community doctor looking after them. And here locally, we can see that by the introduction of the iCloud system, where you don't have to be on the phone for 45 minutes, but you can actually have a call back. So there are little things that will change our lives, will make our lives easier, and we have to work harder, 100%, and the right approach is a cross-party.
Right approach is cross-party. Sarah.
Well, I think the Liberal Democrats have put the NHS and social care front and centre of their manifesto. It's something we believe in passionately. To answer Fiona's question first about social care, we're committed to free personal care for adults, to ensure that they get the care that they need and it's not based on their ability to pay. We want to attract more people to work in the social care sector. We want to boost the pay, the national minimum wage, put a pound on the national minimum wage for people in the care sector because we urgently need greater resources. We want to improve carers' leave and the provision made for family carers. And a lot of our policies in this area have been born out of Ed Davies' own experience. He was a carer for his mother when he was a teenager as she was dying from cancer. He's a carer now for his son John, who I've met on a couple of occasions, who really does have quite profound disabilities. And he's embraced those roles. And I don't know if you saw our party election broadcast where he spoke very candidly about that experience, but he really understands how difficult the care system is, and he is absolutely committed to fixing it. To answer your question, Stephen, the related question about the NHS, we want to invest 8.4 billion in the NHS, and there is so much that needs to be done. People need to have the right to see a GP within 7 days, and I know from speaking to voters on the doorstep here in Barnes, it's a huge issue. People get excellent care from their GPs here in Barnes when they need it, but it takes such a long time to access. And we really, really need to fix that, because to answer the second half of your question, what we really need to fix is primary care and getting people to that first appointment and making sure that they can see the people that they need to see in a timely fashion, and particularly on cancer care, which is another commitment we're making. If to be able to see somebody within a very short time after your first diagnosis. We need to do a lot better in this country on cancer care, and we really want to invest in that. Primarily, we need to get the waiting lists down in the NHS, and this is something I actually speak about a lot when I'm doing my national role as a Treasury and Business spokesperson, because it's fundamental for our economy that people are spending less time on the waiting lists, less time prevented from working because of ill health. So these are our absolute commitments. You've asked about cross-party working. I mean, the Conservatives have been in government for the last Parliament. If they wanted to work cross-party, we would have been very happy to come forward with our suggestions and our help and support for anything that they wanted to do, but that hasn't happened. There is a lot, actually, of consensus across the different parties. Right now we're in an election campaign. Of course, the parties want to differentiate themselves from each other, but we are willing to support anyone, whoever it is who forms the next government. We are willing to support the initiatives that we want to see. And just finally, I think you're referring to the way that the NHS is funded. We remain committed to a free at the point of use, publicly funded healthcare model, but there's so much that needs to be done to transform the way that it operates. It's not working for patients right now. There's actually been quite large increases in funding even over the last few years. Obviously that was required because of COVID and the aftermath, but still people are struggling to access the healthcare that they need. So we really do need, but I do think that investing in their primary care and making sure people can see their GP is absolutely fundamental. And then fixing social care so they can be discharged from hospital afterwards, that will do a lot to really free up hospitals to do the job that they need to do for acute patients.
Let me just inject this from Caroline Hurd. There are fewer GP appointments available than ever in Barnes, and getting them is really challenging. What will the candidates be able to do to influence, to improve the situation? Laura and Chaz, I know you want to speak, but if Sarah and Sarah want to come back.
Yes. Sarah did mention that the Conservative Party hasn't been accommodating the other parties to work together. Let me just remind Sarah that actually it's not 14 years, because we have been in a coalition for the past 5 years.
I said
yes,
the last Parliament.
You
said the last Parliament.
You said
I was
for the
very
last 14 years, because we have been in
not.
coalition together. That said, we have increased the NHS funding by 1/3 in real times since 2010, and what that means is that the NHS funding at the moment is £165 billion, which is a lot of money. So,
thank you. Chaz and then Laura.
I thought it was going to be really easy to find consensus for a moment, and then suddenly the consensus all broke down. Wouldn't it be great if we had proportional representation, so we had a broad spread of opinions, and be forced, in a way, we'd be forced to get... We would have to work together, and the Green Party is quite happy to work together and find cross-party consensus. That's partly what we believe in. To think about the first question, the NHS desperately needs further investment because of the lack of investment in previous years. Under previous governments, the Green Party would commit £30 billion to the NHS and £20 billion to social care as well, and also, like the Lib Dems, provide free social care. So that's a big investment, but it's a big commitment to the NHS.
Can you improve the situation? That's what Caroline Hurd is asking. Can you influence and improve the situation?
What specifically in the southwest? That's part of the job of the MP, isn't it? To do just that. to say this is what we need to do, and look at the waiting lists, look at the GP situation in this particular part of London. And yes, we do need more GPs. That it is incredibly difficult to find an appointment, and waiting lists are way too long. That is part of the job. That's how MPs would try to get work done. Is weigh in where there needs to be
Thank
influence.
You. Can we get the microphone to Patricia Neat, please, Laura?
Thank you. So to the question, what can candidates do? I'm really the only candidate on this table who could say, if I was elected, I'd work with, hopefully if we'll get a Labour government, the Labour government and the Labour mayor in order to champion these kind of issues. So I'm the person that could really do the most in terms of giving Richmond the most powerful voice in government. But I think it's important to frame this answer within the last 14 years of decline that we've seen, at the heart of, for example, austerity, which of course the Liberal Democrats brought in with the Conservatives, how that's really chipped away at the NHS system and our health care. Now, Labour has a plan to change the current situation. We have a plan to deliver 40,000 more appointments each week nationally, a focus on early care diagnosis for cancer, for example, 700,000 more urgent dentist appointments, 8,500 more mental health staff to help as well, and a return to the family doctor, which will hopefully completely change the way that we see health and provision, so we can cut down on time spent on unnecessary, like looking into your family history, for example, because your doctor will just always know that immediately. In terms of the care system specifically, we've heard Wes Streeting talk recently on Newsnight to say that he's very happy to have a cross-party group working on the care system because it's something that we really need cross-party consensus on in order to fix over a longer term. And it's something that is really, really broken at the moment, and he completely accepts that, and we need that long-term strategy in order to fix it properly.
Thank you. Phil, just hang on a moment. Does anyone urgently want to come back? Are you seething about anything on the NHS, on care? Well, wait a minute. Let me get here. You'd like to come in, would you? All right, Fuki, can we have the microphone here, please? On care and NHS. Fuki, could we come here, please? The lady here. Thank you.
Hello, thanks very much. Nikki Krutdek, actually, I'm one of the Green Party councillors, and I brought an amendment to the budget this year for free social care. £100,000 was all we were asking for to reduce care contributions, and the Lib Dem Council voted against it. I just wondered how that lies with your pledge for free social care.
Okay, Sarah, do you want to come in on that, please, and then take the microphone back to Stephen, please.
The normal...
No, wait a minute. Oh. Sarah, answer that.
I can't answer that question, to be honest.
Okay.
She's talking about a council matter.
Okay.
I don't know anything about that. I'm not involved in setting the budget, and it's the first I've heard of it, I'm afraid. I'm sorry your argument didn't carry the day, Nikki, but obviously other cuts would have had to have been made to accommodate that.
But it doesn't really align with what you're saying.
I can't answer about what the council are doing.
Okay.
That's quite surprising. It's the first she's heard of it, I think.
Stephen, very quickly if you can.
We've heard the standard responses from the parties, but when are they actually going to get together? This is what we all want in this country. The health service is a complete bloody shambles at the moment. It's underfunded, we know, and there are these terrible doctor strikes which shouldn't be taking place. Why on earth are the parties not getting together? And when we come to looking abroad and see what works there, only yesterday, the Times had a headline, UK cancer survival rates trailed decades behind Scandinavia. Why are we so reluctant? I repeat this. Why are we so reluctant to take on board what works abroad and adopt it here?
All right, we don't have a minister here, but do any of you want to respond to that? Sarah?
I just want to quickly respond on the point about GPs and GP appointments, because I feel like I've already responded to the gentleman on his initial point. But on GP appointments, the most important thing we need to do is to retain GPs who are working in the sector at the moment. There are so many of them that are leaving, and we really do need to improve the terms and conditions for GPs to make sure that they are encouraged to stay. We certainly need to recruit more, and what we aim to do by the end of the Parliament is to boost the GP workforce by 8,000, and that will have a big impact on people's ability to get a GP appointment. So I just wanted to respond on that point.
Sarah, Laura, do you want to come back?
On the GP.
On this particular issue?
Oh yes, absolutely, I agree with you. We need to get going. That's why I'm standing for Parliament, because I would love to be that strong voice. My mother is a doctor. She has dedicated her entire life to the health system, so I would like to be a champion for it, and I would like to make sure that people behave as grown-ups. That is why I'm here standing in front of you.
Laura?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting point about the differences in terms of international provisions of healthcare. My father, for example, was diagnosed with cancer 10 years ago, and he actually he's moved country since then, mainly because he knows that he'll get much better healthcare in a different country, in a different European country. So, people shouldn't have to be forced to move in order to get the care that they need. When he was in the UK, they said that the NHS said that they would stop scanning him for a specific kind of cancer, which they know comes back very regularly because they don't have the funds to scan him when the times that he needs it. So, yeah, it's absolutely appalling that this is the case at the moment. Something has to change, and Labour will change that.
All right. We've got an hour to go. We've been going 45 minutes. So I'm going to go to, is it Patricia there? Yeah. Good. Patricia, do come in. Let's move on with the points you want to make.
Yes, I'm not sure which of the questions that I have in mind are relevant
About
to
child benefit.
Okay. It's estimated that removing the two-child benefit cap would lift 250,000 children out of poverty and ease the lot of another 850,000. The main parties are retaining the cap. What are the candidates' views on this?
Sarah?
I don't know who you mean by the main parties, but certainly the Liberal Democrats are committed to removing the cap on the two-child limit. We think that's absolutely fundamental. The issue of child poverty in this country has become, it's catastrophic. And I know, and obviously we're here in a very wealthy part of London, but I can tell you from my own experience being a constituency MP and doing constituency surgeries that the issue of poverty is just as alive here in Richmond, right here in Barnes, as it is anywhere else. As far as I'm concerned, it's absolutely fundamental. And there's no doubt, and all the data, all the research shows that the instances of child poverty are being very much driven by the two-child cap. So we're absolutely fundamentally committed to scrapping it, and that's in our manifesto.
Chaz?
Yeah, well, similarly, there's a bit of consensus again. We are also committed to scrapping that two-child benefit cap, and also to providing more funding for social care for children as well. So that's, that's what we have to offer.
Laura?
I find it quite hard to necessarily believe everything that the Liberal Democrats put in their manifesto. The one time that they were in power, they've U-turned immediately on some of their headline policies. So
What's in the Labour manifesto, Laura?
Tuition fees, for example, being one of them, the main headline. So I think it's quite easy to put a manifesto together thinking you're not going to get into power.
What's in the Labour manifesto?
The VAT on independent schools.
I would love to talk about the VAT on private schools. I'm sure that will come up again.
It's coming up.
Yeah, I can imagine. The two-child benefit cap, for example, that we're talking about at the moment. Look, we're in a really difficult economic situation. We've had 14 years of decline, and we've had, austerity really ripping societies apart. So there's a lot that we have to focus on economically. As soon as the time is right and as soon as we're able to, I'm sure we will look at the two-child benefit. I personally would like to champion scrapping that when we can, but we want to be really responsible when it comes to the economy and make sure that we, put societies first and develop our economic policies at the right time when we can.
Sarah?
I would like to just remind Laura that in 2010, when the Conservative government got in, the Labour minister, left a note saying there is no money anymore. So that is the type of inheritance that we got. That said, this country has delivered.
Is that what your government is saying now?
No, that is what. No, they're not. They're not giving that the inflation is down to 2%. I don't know if you've heard about that, and the economy is doing incredibly well. But what I want to say is that we have delivered the biggest childcare reform in history in this country by giving parents 30 hours free childcare for children from 9 months up to 5 years old when they start schools. And what that means is saving working hard family parents up to £6,900. And as a single mother of 2 children that has to go to work, that is incredibly revolutionary, and that's very, very helpful. And this is what a government should be about, pragmatic and problem-solving solutions.
Can I just come in on also, you can't keep saying that you've inherited problems back in 2010. Like, you've had 14 years. You've had 14 years to solve them.
Laura, we did. As a matter of fact, we don't have it anymore.
You've had 14 years to solve these problems, and you've made most of them worse. Like, you can't keep saying that.
No, I don't know. I disagree. We had the last 5 years incredibly hard because we have been through a pandemic and we have seen Putin invading Ukraine, and that's what has happened. It's a painful argument for a lot of us.
What do you mean by that? A painful argument?
Well,
tell us more about your view.
Well, there is no secret that for a lot of people was a very difficult decision. Richmond Park, especially, over 70% voted Remain. And look at the beauty of this country, democracy. It was a vote. It was a democratic vote. People voted, and as much as we might like it or not, and I am saying it was a very difficult decision for a lot of people, and we have to acknowledge it. But it did happen, and there is something that I sometimes do say, and I know my campaign manager is going to have a laugh now, but it is like a painful divorce, and there are 2 ways of getting out of it. You can still cry and hold on to it, or you can move and make something out of it. And I think it's time now, 7 years after, to move something and do something about that.
Stop doing that. Stop it. You're being so rude.
That's fine. Love a good challenge.
All right, let me move on. Because Laura raised VAT on school fees. Nikki Urquhart, where are you? I hope you're here. Can we get to Nikki? And also Peter Buckwell. There's also a question from Eleanor Poulton. Do you support the policy to put VAT on school fees? And if so, how can you expect these people in the constituency affected to vote for you if it's about voting to put VAT on school fees? Nikki.
Panel. What do you all think about the Labour plan to impose VAT on independent school fees?
And Peter Buckwell has asked the same question. Where do you stand on Labour's plan to impose a VAT on independent school fees? Sarah Olney.
I'm completely opposed to this plan. It's certainly not Liberal Democrat Party policy. It's not something we'd support, and if the bill comes forward in the next Parliament to effect such a change, it's something we'll be voting against. I think on principle, we shouldn't be taxing education. Education has always been free of VAT because, like so many other things, it's regarded as a public good. You know, the more education, the better. So as soon as you start to tax something, you start to limit its supply, you start to limit its accessibility, and fundamentally, we don't agree with that.
Laura.
So just to clarify, VAT does not work based on what is a public good. VAT works based on what is considered a really essential good. So I've worked obviously on the tampon tax campaign, which is all about VAT for a very long time. We're talking about items that are essential, like items, escape tax.
Education is, Laura.
Education, state education is essential. But Labour wants to create a society where our schools, our state schools, are brilliant for everyone, and the only way we're going to be able to do that is by putting VAT on private schools which will help us to create more teachers in state schools. However, I really do understand that it can be really anxiety-inducing, and I don't want people to think that they're immediately going to have to pay 20% more on their fees. A lot of private schools that I work with in my social enterprise say that they will absorb some of the fees, so you won't have to be passed on straight away. And also, school fees have increased above and beyond the rate of inflation every single year for the past 20 years, so most private schools will be able to absorb some of those fees. It's about fairness, and it's about creating an education system that works for everyone, and I really believe in that, whether it's popular to the audience or not. That's what I believe in, and I'll stand behind that. And I think that this policy is, about a Labour Party that believes in the public services that, people have. And just to remind people as well, 79% of people in Richmond, or of students in Richmond, go to those state schools that will benefit from this scheme. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Chaz.
Yeah, I agree with Laura, actually. I think it is. Yeah, I think it's fair. Private education is a commercial entity, so why can't you tax a commercial entity that would provide more funding for state schools to get into a better position, much higher quality provision? We know that there's a big gap between state and private schools in terms of their facilities, what they have to offer, and we need to close that gap. It's a damaging gap for our society. It creates a two-class system, and that ultimately leads to other problems further down the line. So yes, I do agree with Laura, and I do stand behind that policy as well. And the Green Party, if we are elected, however many Green MPs are elected, we'll stand behind that policy too.
Sarah, and can we get the microphone to Ludovico, please? Are you here, Ludovico? Yep. Can we get the microphone there, please?
Absolutely against it. It's a tax on education, it's a tax on parents' choices, it's a tax on aspiration. One of the greatest things of this community of Richmond Park, and that is, let me tell you, as somebody who's got children in Richmond Park, Laura, is that we've gone from 91% of rated as outstanding to 97% in the last 14 years in this constituency. And now one of the reasons why that happened is because there is this incredibly good balance between independent schools and state schools. Now, Chaz, I'm surprised you're actually for it, because you are a councillor and you know that, for example, if that was to be implemented tomorrow, year 8, we have no spaces in Richmond Park, and not in the neighbouring constituencies. And that is because the council has responded back to some of the...
That isn't true. There are spaces.
Chaz, I've got emails from residents from the council saying that there are no spaces in year 8 for children in this constituency or in the neighbouring constituency. So where are you going to accommodate our children, Chaz?
Richmond Park Academy has not been full at the start of each academic year for the last couple of years. And also school rolls are falling, we know that.
Again,
yeah,
Chaz,
we know that
year 8, I've got emails from
schools.
residents, I've got emails from residents,
Yeah,
which I would love to share with you, if that's okay with you after this, just to let you know that we cannot accommodate it.
Well, that's not true.
But it's not just that. It's about having the opportunity to make that choice. Every child is unique. Every school is unique. Every family and every situation is unique. But I agree with Sarah. What we have in common as parents is that we want what's best for our children. And we need to have the opportunity to do that. Personally, my son attends an independent school, and that's because he's got some issues. He's got dyspraxia that he had, so he needs an extra help. But I had to make a very difficult choice in my life, and I'm still, for example, a renter. I do not own a home, and that is because I have decided to invest all my income and my money into my child's education. But I was able to make that choice, and I want parents in the future to have that same opportunity.
You shouldn't have to do that, though, should you? You shouldn't have to be in that position.
But Chaz, let's be honest. Where are you going to accommodate the extra pressure?
There is, as
from
I said,
tomorrow,
there are falling
Chaz,
school
we
rolls.
need to be fair with people.
I don't know
We
why
need
you're
to
not
be
accepting
pragmatic.
that
We've
basic
just been speaking about being trustworthy. The Labour Party is saying that from the 5th of July, if they win the election, they're going to implement 20% of VAT on independent school. We've got I speak to people, I speak to other parents at the school, and they're saying that they're going to pull out the children from the private school. Where are you going to accommodate them?
As I
in
just
the
said, as I
constituency?
said, there are falling school rolls. In fact, falling school rolls by 7%
Chas,
across
you
the whole
have
country.
no space
and that's
in
the
year
same here.
8.
There
That's a
is
fact.
space.
I've got the emails from the residents from Richmond Council responding, we're incredibly sorry, we do not have a space for your son from September. Where are you going to accommodate them?
Pass that on to me, please.
It's about facts. I will.
All right,
actually.
let's pause at that point because we're not going to get agreement.
Can
but there
I
are
just-
other... Laura, did you want to come in quickly,
Can I
please?
just add some...
Because I want to move on to housing.
Okay, can I just just going to add a couple of things, if that's okay, just to clarify Labour's plans, because I have had a lot of emails about this. So just to clarify as well, private schools will still get their charity status, which means they won't have to pay corporation tax or anything like that. The VAT on private education will not apply to nurseries or after-school clubs. That's another thing that's been circulating online locally. And also students who are disabled that have specific care plans will not be charged VAT for their fees. So when those children that have specific plans that can only be provided by specialist schools, they will not have those fees on either. So
But
just
there are
wanted to
children
clarify.
that are on learning support that don't have that status, Laura. What are you going to do about
Well,
that?
they should have great care in our state schools. You shouldn't just be caring
Laura,
about kids
you cannot
who
accommodate
can afford
it. You're
it.
saying
It
you're
should
going...
be good for everyone.
Laura, Labour Party are saying that they're going to recruit 6,600, or I can't remember the official figure, but it was around 6,000.
6,500.
Yes, 6,500, thank you, new teachers. That means one teacher for 3 schools. So when are you going to have time to build bigger classrooms? When are you going to have time to build new schools? And when are you going to actually recruit other teachers without raising our taxes?
We do have a plan to change the education system. I'm sure that might be coming up later, including having mental health hubs in all schools. So that will also take pressures off current teachers. We know also that current teachers that I work with as part of my social enterprise, they have to fund, food banks for kids, and lots of other pressures have been put on them due to the 14 years of decline that we've seen throughout society. So that's really what's putting pressures on teachers.
But you're going to do that by increasing taxes on already working families who have a lot of fiscal pressure. And I'm sorry I do numbers, but this is what is happening.
It is really interesting that we started today by talking about trust in politicians and integrity. And it's really interesting that the Conservatives and yourself, Sarah, have talked again and again that Labour's going to increase our taxes, when you know that's not true. You know that's not true. The
20% of VAT, Laura. 20%. You've just said it. 20%. If you have 3 children, 20%, and they are attending independent school, 20% means having another child to pay for.
You know that Labour will not raise VAT, we will not raise national insurance, we will not raise income tax. You know that. This statistic that the Conservatives... Can I just respond? This statistic that the Conservatives have come out with, this £2,000 statistics, which you have shared yourself, Sarah, on social media,
yes.
That statistic is not only intended to mislead people and presented in an entirely unfair way, because the actual statistic is £2,000 over 5 years. But not only that, the maths that have gone into that is obviously completely wrong and false. But Newsnight, probably many people have seen this, Newsnight the other day did the exact same math for the Conservative manifesto and discovered that your figure would be £3,000. So it's absolutely ridiculous that we're talking about integrity, we're talking about trust, and you're still perpetuating a lie that the Conservatives have tried to use to win this election, because they don't want us to talk about the 14 years record that you've had. So can we please talk about those issues rather than this false one?
I'm talking about
All right,
facts.
I'm going to... I'd ask for your patience here. We ventilated significantly this issue. We have a lot of other issues in the next 35, 40 minutes.
Give a woman a microphone.
Please be patient. What?
Give a woman a microphone and this is what happens.
Can I just say, I think that's quite sexist.
I'm not going to respond to that. Right. Ludovico, please.
Very much. In the early 90s, when I was born in London, the average Londoner could buy a property with around 4 times their annual income. As we approach 2024, that number has gone up to 12 times average annual earnings. More and more young professionals like myself are struggling to get onto the housing ladder. What will your party do to help resolve this issue and to ease the pressure on younger professionals?
Sarah Olney, given that you were, until very recently, Treasury and Business spokesperson for the Lib Dems in the former House.
Yes, I actually still am. I'm still the party spokesperson, even though I'm not an MP anymore. But yes, we have a commitment in our manifesto to building 380,000 new homes a year across the UK, including 150,000 social homes, so to be provided to people who find it less affordable. That's a difficult thing to achieve. It's the sort of thing politicians for ages have been talking about that as an aspiration. But we've done a very, very detailed policy on this. I think the most immediate requirement actually is in our planning departments. And I should just declare an interest. I'm married to a town planner, so I'm unusually fond of town planners. And we just need more of them. And even here in Richmond, we are short of town planners. Across London, it's a really, really acute problem. And so many of the issues in our planning system come down to just that lack of resource. So we need to recruit more town planners. We need to do more to free up land. Local authorities need to have more freedom over how they can dispose of the land that they own. At the moment, they're required to get the best value for it, but that's only ever expressed in monetary terms. There is a best community value that can be available. And my colleague in Twickenham, Manira Wilson, has fought very hard to get legislation amended to reflect that. We need to incentivise the use of brownfield sites, to make sure that those can be financially viable. These are some of the commitments that we've made to ensure that we can meet that commitment to 380,000 homes a year. There is absolutely no doubt that building more homes is the key to solving this. It's an availability crisis, but as you said, Ludovico, it's an affordability crisis, and there just have to be more homes. There's no other way to address it.
Chaz, help us unbundle this, given that you're a councillor as well. When you look at something like the Mortlake Brewery, which has become essentially a brownfield site by the nature of what's happened there, but part of that is going to be developed, or the plan is to develop it with social housing, yet it's going to create enormous congestion. I'm not going to go into all the planning details. Help us unbundle the dilemmas we're facing on this very important issue of accommodation for the next generation.
Blimey, that's an easy question, isn't it?
You've got a minute.
I've got a minute to do. I think one thing that we need to do in our planning system is to avoid being so developer-led, because when planning applications come before councils, they're quite often, it's the presumption that development is good, therefore the developer will win out in their particular version of that development. And so affordable housing and social housing gets left behind, and that's the case with the Stag development, which has gone through several iterations as well. And again, yes, there are other problems that come together with that particular
But a condition of development there is social housing.
Sorry, say that again?
A condition of development there will be social housing.
Yes, but at the moment it's a very, well, no, it's not very significant at the moment in the latest approved application. It's, I think, 7% of the total housing provision is social rent, and that's not really what we're looking for, is it? We're looking for a much higher percentage, but that comes, again, it does produce problems in terms of, well, how do you manage to afford that as a developer? Well, there are ways and means of doing that, and obviously central government can affect this, can provide more funding for social rent homes. It can also help local authorities by giving more funding to, get more planners into the system. I agree with Sarah there. And so, there's a key to this that is more about how we approach the whole issue. And if this is our priority, to get social rent and other affordable types of housing, then we need to implement that priority.
Laura.
Chaz, I think we should create a Green Labour coalition, because I agree with you in terms of the brewery not having enough affordable housing. One of the plans had under 10%, as Chaz said, and the Liberal Democrat Council agreed to it. So that's not a party that believes in affordable housing. And to the person who asked the question, I completely understand your position. I'm also trying to buy my first house, have been for the last couple of years. I'm in my 30s, worked my whole life, same with my partner, and still can't afford a house. Labour will try and solve this issue by building 1.5 million houses. We'll also change the planning and regulation. I feel like I'm the one now that's killing the microphones. Change planning laws so that we can build those houses more quickly to deal with the crisis that is, building. God, this is getting worse, isn't it? It sounds like a whale. Yeah, okay, thank you. Oh, almost. And we'll create more first-time buyer schemes so that people who are buying their first homes will have first dibs on the houses that they need. So I completely understand where you're coming from. I've been going through this myself, so it's something that I'm going to prioritise, having experienced it. And yeah, we need more affordable homes for everyone.
Easier to say, but how do you achieve it?
By changing those planning laws so that we can, planning regulations so that we can get those homes where we need them, by working with communities to make sure that we have the homes that these local communities need, and by making sure that we commit to 1.5 million affordable housing. Affordable housing has gone down under the Conservatives because they haven't prioritised the affordable houses that we need, and it's something, Labour is focused on creating public services that work and housing that people need, and that's all, in the same vein.
But we can't build on Greenbelt, though, surely.
Yeah, but that was the question I was going to ask you, Laura. What do you think about building on Greenbelt?
Yeah, so I think we shouldn't obviously build on places that are genuinely Greenbelt. Some parts of the Greenbelt aren't actually Greenbelt, so there are like petrol stations, for example, in the Greenbelt. So we can build on areas that aren't genuinely Greenbelt, but then obviously protect the wider forestry areas. Labour's come out with a forestry plan to make sure that we have enough forest areas that are really well protected and, celebrated in and around areas like London. We should build, like Sarah was saying, on the kind of brown belt areas that aren't truly green belt.
All right, Sarah, just before I come to you, Mark Poulton and Paul Phillips, you want to talk about economic growth. Can we get the microphones to them, please, Phil? Sarah.
One of the reasons why people decide to move to Richmond Park is because of the wonderful green parks that we've got and the green spaces. So absolutely no construction on the green belts. Chaz, I'm with you on this. And prioritizing brownfield, as Sarah was suggesting. The Mortlake Brewery, well, I just want to point out before that the Conservative government has delivered 2.5 million homes. And we have also introduced the stamp duty relief in 2017 and increased the threshold. Please let me finish. And increased the threshold to £425,000 for the next Parliament. But what I would like to say about the Mortlake Brewery, given that I do live on this side of Barnes, and I know firsthand what it means to be completely isolated traffic-wise, I have to say it has been quite painful to see that the number of affordable housing that has been put forward from the Lib Dem, 7%, is frankly quite pathetic. But also the non-consideration about local people that live in the area, not a plan on infrastructure, not a plan on traffic. As things stand, we all know, everybody who lives in Barnes know, that we cannot accommodate the workload, let alone the actual building of the secondary school or the 1,000 homes as it is. So we need to come up with a plan. We need to come up with a plan that doesn't isolate completely Barnes, Mortlake, Sheen, and the rest of the area.
Sarah Olney.
I just wanted to very quickly come back on that 7% social housing. The original plan that was approved by the council in January 2020 had a significantly higher share of social housing. It was called in by the mayor, who sat on it for 3 years, eventually rejected it, and so now the new plan has considerably less. So it's not, the Liberal Democrat Council have approved the plans. They want to see the housing on that site. We need the housing. It's the Labour mayor who has prevented building housing on the brewery site.
The Labour mayor is the one person standing up for the amount of affordable housing that we need. There wasn't enough affordable housing in the first plan, and now there's even less in the second.
There is no housing there yet. And no housing and no school.
We don't need just any kind of buildings that will harm the communities. That's like more harmful on a longer term basis. We don't just need a sticking plaster. We need something that is really going to, promote our communities and be the kind of housing that we need for the long term to solve the issue. And the Labour Mayor is the only person who stood up for affordable housing in that plan. If Sadiq Khan was not mayor, we would have the brewery site with hardly any affordable housing, and we'd have a plan that isn't supported by the local people because your council didn't stand up for them.
There is no housing on that site, Laura. There is no school. Nothing has happened because the mayor has been sat on the plans for 3 years, and because he rejected the original proposal, the new proposal has considerably less social housing.
We need the right kind of housing. We don't just accept any.
All right, we've got 30 minutes to run, and I want to make sure we cover as many of the issues that have been brought up as we can. So let's keep the answers relatively brief, sharp, and as on target as possible. The economy. Mark Poulton, you've got the microphone.
Thank you.
And then
the Labour Party manifesto depends on growth in the economy. We'd all love to believe in that. When do you and each of the parties believe that the economy will be growing sufficiently strongly to raise sufficient tax to invest in public services without inflicting further pain on the electorate?
Paul Phillips.
My question is very simply this. All I hear from Parliament and politicians is spend, 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 and no real consideration is given how to grow this economy. We're getting poorer by the week, by the month, by the year. What support of new technologies will you fund and support in order to create growth in this country? And then you can start using the capital that is generated from it to fund all these expensive projects, including the NHS.
So easy to promise, difficult to pay for it, and promise money for it. Sarah Olney, given you have been Treasury and Business spokesperson and still are, yes. How do you square this circle? The need to spend money, create growth, but also to generate stability, economic stability, at a time when it's so difficult at the moment?
That's right. Well, we're in a very difficult place at the moment. There's no doubt that our economy has underperformed for many years. People are facing a cost of living crisis, and living standards have declined. So economic growth is an absolute fundamental, and we do need to focus on how we're going to achieve it. We've set out in our manifesto a number of different things. Firstly, we want to invest in green infrastructure, to your point about technology. Specifically, we are talking about renewable energy, we're talking about wind farms, we're talking about solar. We really need to accelerate the transition to green forms of transport, to greening our industrial sector. The technologies actually already exist. We just need, what we need fundamentally above all is an industrial strategy that really encompasses the path towards economic growth, that pulls together all of the different areas of government policy, that puts and that the government is really starting to drive forward. We've had so much drift, so much contradiction, so much, switching. We're for HS2, we've scrapped HS2, people don't know where they are. We need stability, and we need a clear plan, and that's fundamental to what needs to happen next. We need to invest in skills. That is so important. We have massive vacancies across our workforce in every sector, in the health sector, in education, but in manufacturing, in tech, and it is so important that we really, really invest in young people. We need to fix the apprenticeship levy. We need to encourage young people to really invest in their skills, and also people in later life, people who are changing careers. People my age will have entered the workforce in the late 90s, early noughties. The jobs today are so different, so you can't thrive in today's environment if you've still only got, say, the tech savviness that you had at the turn of the century. So that's really, really important. I mentioned before about the NHS waiting lists. We need to get people off those waiting lists. They need to be living productive lives again, obviously for their own health and well-being, but also because they can return to the workforce and start really delivering on that. And Above all, we need a better relationship with Europe, and there's a really, really fundamental to growing our economy is to make sure that we fix that relationship that the Conservatives have damaged so profoundly, that we can really start to build those trading relationships again, those that cultural exchange. We want to see a youth mobility scheme, we want to see a veterinary agreement, we want to see mutual recognition of professional qualifications. We've got a long way to go to rebuild trust with our European neighbours and our European partners. And until we've rebuilt that trust, we can't even think about negotiating, a return to anything like what we had before. But the Liberal Democrats are absolutely committed, when it's possible, to returning to the single market, because I think that would make the biggest difference to our economic prospects.
But just to be clear, Sarah, does your party believe that growth is achievable at the rate that is necessary to reverse the trend we're in at the moment?
It is. It's not going to happen overnight, but I set out the things I think that we can start as soon as this election is over, to invest in skills, to invest in green infrastructure, and but above all, to be really, really clear about what it is that we're looking to achieve, which sectors we need to invest in, what infrastructure projects we want to invest in, and that's where an industrial strategy comes in. It's something that Liberal Democrats have always championed. When Vince Cable was the business secretary, he put together an industrial strategy, and the Conservatives have just scrapped it. They've just chucked it out, and we've had, ever since then, just drift and uncertainty. And so that, I think, is the quickest and easiest thing, if you like, that we could change straight away, and that will make a big difference. But as I say, that we've got a long way to go.
Laura, can you give a summary in short order of what Starmer has been saying, what your leader has been saying very clearly about growth? Because there are many who believe that it's not achievable at the rate and with the commitment that he declares.
It's definitely possible. Just because it hasn't happened, under the current government, doesn't mean that with a new plan we can't deliver quicker growth, the growth that we kind of need, the kind of growth that we need. To create that growth, Labour will deliver a whole load of economic policies. They'll create tougher fiscal rules, well-paid jobs with an industrial strategy. We'll have a living wage to reflect the cost of living crisis, which is, of course, going to expand upon the minimum wage that Labour brought in. End 0 hours contracts for security at work. We'll halve the government's consultancy spending, which is currently a huge waste of public money, and we'll end this VIP fast lane of procurement process that the Conservative government has put in place, and again is a huge waste of money and leads to inefficiencies. In terms of new technologies as well, we'll obviously create Great British Energy, which will create 500,000 jobs in and of itself, and it will create new sources of energy that will be green, that we need in order to stop relying on foreign sources of energy that holds us hostage, and that will allow people to have more money in their pockets because they're spending less on their energy bills, which will help to grow the economy in and of itself as well. I would also like very quickly to ask Sarah what she thinks about austerity. If we would go back to austerity again under the Liberal Democrats, which of course we had under the coalition government, and if that's, because austerity of course is obviously always a choice, and is a choice that Labour would never make. So I wondered if that's something that Sarah would make.
Well, it's a pity that Labour didn't win enough MPs in 2010 for us to go into coalition with them, really, isn't it? But I think there's a bit of a counterfactual here, Laura, because Labour went into the 2010 general election promising £80 billion worth of cuts to the public sector. The Conservatives went into the 2010 general election promising £82 billion worth of cuts, and what was eventually delivered was £81 billion. So it's very convenient to have a counterfactual of austerity would never have happened if Labour got into power. But in actual fact, that's precisely what you were committing to. So, back at you. How would you have done it?
Zara.
I think that's a nice deflection. Let's have a look at the records of things that we've actually done, and also it depends on, of course, where you're planning to cut those funds, which public services you're hoping to cut them from. The Labour Party would never back austerity. That's something that's completely anti-Labour's commitment to public services, like we've been talking about throughout the night. So yeah, if you'd like to answer the question rather than ask another question, that would be very helpful.
I think it's the audience are asking the questions, and neither Sarah or Chaz have had the opportunity yet to ask the one about economic growth.
Sarah, it's your moment.
Thank you. We have been through a lot in the last couple of years. We've been through a worldwide pandemic. We've been through a war in Ukraine, and that has had a huge impact on our economy. But we also went from inflation being to 11% to 2% in the last couple of days. And that is because the plan, sticking to a stable and securing and responsible plan, we had to borrow money during the pandemic in order to pay the furlough scheme. And we were very successful in doing that because we didn't let anyone down. But we have to repay that money, and that is why the inflation went up to 11%. And that's why we had to make some very difficult decisions, and we had to be responsible with the household budgets and their pockets. And that's what we've done. But the plan is working. Inflation is down to 2%. We've secured deals, and I completely agree with Sarah. We need to have a great relationship with Europe, but not just Europe, every country. And we've secured a deal with 73 countries worth 1.1 trillion pounds. But not just that, we're the second largest exporter in services around the world, second just to the US. But also on apprenticeship, I know Sarah touched on that, and I am absolutely with her. We need to do more in apprenticeship. But we have been very successful in this government on apprenticeship. We've delivered 5.8 million apprenticeships. 70% of our occupation is covered by apprenticeship. We always have this, we always think that Germany, at least this is me growing up in Italy, Germany was seen as the best country on apprenticeship. Well, guess what the number is in the country is 33%. In this country, we have delivered 70% of our occupation being covered by apprenticeship. And we have to do more, but this is the right way.
Thank you. Chaz, quickly, can you?
Quickly, yes. Well, I mean, obviously, as Greens, we want to focus on the green economy. I wonder where that idea came from. Yeah. So focusing on renewables, focusing on retrofitting, those are huge industries. There are vast amounts of houses to be retrofitted. We know that our housing stock in this country really needs that major uplift to make homes more energy efficient, and renewables are obviously the future, so we need to plough more investment into that, and that's why Green Party is pledging significant investments, 50 billion into renewables and 29 billion into retrofitting as well. So yes, growth in those sectors where we can see the future, and we know that that's the direction of travel that we need to go in. Absolutely, we need to ramp down on fossil fuels. So we don't want to be giving away any more licenses for things like Rosebank. We would cancel that.
Nick, all right, can I just answer to the gentleman here? I forgot about the tech point. That was a very interesting point. I did a master's a couple of years ago on venture capital. I am incredibly passionate about that, given my financial sector employment. But I do think that that's the future, and I think we're incredibly lucky in this country. We've got 25% of the entire tech projects that sit in the UK, Europe-wise. We can do more. We've got the talents, we've got the money. We just need to showcase it.
Thank you. Picking up on what Chaz has just been talking about, Danielle Coleman makes a very important point. Why is there so little mention of climate change in the election campaign? And what are your party's main plans for tackling the climate emergency? Emphasis on climate emergency. Chaz?
Yes, absolutely. It is a climate emergency. And I think the Green Party is the only party that is taking that seriously and looking to make the urgent action that we all
Do you think the other parties are evading responsibility on this?
Well, there are some good ideas coming from other parties, but ultimately, I have to say yes, they are, because there has been not enough action on these issues over the last, well, we could say how long back do we want to go? I mean, in 2005, Nick Stern brought out his report that said, if we don't invest now, we're going to pay for this later. It's going to be a massive cost later. We need to invest in green technology, in all of the technologies that I've just been mentioning, as well as sustainable transport, of course. Otherwise, later down the line, it just gets worse and worse. It gets more and more expensive. Have the major parties, have the governments of each day responded to that effectively? Well, I think the results speak for themselves. 408 climate scientists in the UK have said we're not moving quickly enough. We need to move quicker. So, yeah, absolutely, we need to move quicker. It's an emergency.
Thank you. Laura, given that there was a commitment by the Labour Party for 28 billion, then it was watered down, withdrawn, and it's a bit ambivalent. Is it a serious part of policy for the Labour Party? Is it something that will be reintroduced if you get to government?
It is a serious priority, but we want to deliver the green promises that we have correctly. We want to make sure that everything in the manifesto are things that we can definitely deliver on, and that's why, for example, Great British Energy was in our manifesto, which is creating a publicly owned green power company, bringing 500 jobs to the country that will be very specific in green skills. And in our industrial plan, we also have a lot of mentions of green skills, green jobs, and how we're going to bring them to the country and make sure they flourish as well. I do think that one of the things specific to London that Labour's done to showcase its dedication to the environment is introduce schemes that might not be very popular, like ULEZ, for example, but we feel that we have to implement them for the environment. We hear that on the doorstep. A lot of people don't like ULEZ, but it is really important. Under ULEZ, for example, Sadiq Khan has managed to reduce the amount of schools that are in illegal levels of pollution, air pollution.
But quickly, do you reckon that your party recognises what is happening with the climate emergency as an existential threat, which, if you come to government for 5 years, will be significantly worse in 5 years' time?
It definitely won't be worse under Labour, for sure. I mean, Keir Starmer has already said that he understands that we have a climate emergency, but we need to tackle it in a way that is strategic and in a way that we can definitely, we definitely can tackle it. For example, one of my friends is an engineer, actually one of my partner's friends, I should say, because he's here today, but he's an engineer, and he talks to us a lot about this in terms of governments tend to come out with very ambitious plans about the environment without speaking to the engineers to see what can actually be done in that time. So we want to make sure that our pledges can be done and can be done in a fair way that brings communities along with the plans themselves. And just to finish that last bit, so under ULEZ we've reduced these schools in illegal amounts of air pollution from 200 to 20. So we know that it's working, and we know that those sort of plans do work, and will continue to.
Sarah, the very clear impression is that certainly your current leader, the Prime Minister, is barely lukewarm on issues to do with sustainability. In September last year, he withdrew much of the commitment of the government, even though net zero is part of law in this country. Help us understand quickly whether you are committed at all, because it appears that the party is going to the right, and the right, certainly driven by reform, doesn't want to get involved in net zero at all.
Well, let me just say that we have increased the renewable generation from 2010 from 7% to 50%. So we have been working on that, absolutely. The only thing that I think what has happened is we have been through so much, and the households have been through so much. So it is not stepping back from the net zero agenda, is doing it in a responsible way by giving people the opportunity to have the money to manage the change. And that's what the government has said, we will do it, but we will do it in a responsible way, not by increasing taxes, because what Laura is talking about, according to an independent review, about around £7 billion tax highs on energy that will be ultimately down to the household budget. So if we don't want to, like ULEZ was, nobody's questioning if ULEZ was good or bad. The trouble is the timing that happened, the timing where families were already struggling, the timing where I was canvassing in Richmond Park, and I heard people saying to me that they had small businesses with only one car, and they had to shut down because they were unable to pay the ULEZ tax. So it's about giving these people the opportunity during a cost of living crisis to be responsible for what we can do and be very pragmatic, because one of the things that is missing is pragmatism and actually being problem solvers instead of talking, we will do this, we will do that. What is really happening? We need to help people now.
Sarah Olney.
Well, since Laura is so keen to talk about the Liberal Democrats' record in government, it's gives me a great opportunity to talk about the fact that when Ed Davey was the Climate Change Secretary, that's when he really made a real difference to how renewable power projects are funded in this country. And Sarah's absolutely right. We have massively increased the provision of renewable power to our grid, and that's the step change that the Liberal Democrats achieved in government. Our goal for this next Parliament, we need to see, and we're calling it an emergency upgrade programme because it is an emergency. We really, really need to do more to insulate our homes, to install heat pumps. We need to start with those on the lowest incomes who are currently paying the highest bills for their energy, as well as increasing the delivery of renewable energy, not least because we've learned over the course of this last Parliament how important energy security is, and we don't want to be reliant on dubious regimes overseas, if I can put it like that, for our power needs any longer. We need to be self-sufficient, and renewable energies is the way forward. So renewable energy, but also reducing energy demand by a huge program to upgrade home insulation and energy efficiency. That's our core commitment in the manifesto. We think that's the thing we can do now to really achieve a step change in this country, because there's no doubt that home heating is currently one of the biggest sources of emissions, and there's so much more we can do to really tackle that.
All right. Building on that, and this is expected, river health, Thames Water. There are several questions here, and I'm going to summarise them because of the lack of time at the moment. How would you, this from Christine Latec, how would you hold water companies, in particular Thames Water, to account for their sewage spills, their leakage, and ignoring of public health over the interest of their shareholders? Do you advocate nationalisation? There are two or three more very much in the same vein, but I've just chosen Christine's to highlight where we are and the real concerns there are. Chaz?
Yes, Christine, we do advocate nationalisation of Thames Water and, in fact, all the water companies. The reasons for that are really clear. The current regime doesn't work. We have no way of enforcing the rules. We have no way of really applying pressure on water companies to do what they should be doing, which is not spilling sewage into our rivers and into our oceans. So, yeah, absolutely. We need to take some kind of further action which will leave us in a much better position, leave those companies accountable, much more accountable than they are now, because at present they are only accountable to their shareholders. And there are, I think, as Thames Water, there are several overseas entities, sovereign wealth funds, I think.
Macquarie.
Yes, exactly. That are actually the major shareholders in Thames Water, and of course they have no interest in this country or in our local area, in how clean our water is, and they have extracted vast sums. So yes, Christine.
Sarah, because you have Thames Water, which is massively in debt, having paid shareholders vast amounts of money, and they don't have the money to do what is necessary to clean up the river and also act when there is pollution.
Well, in 2010, when we got in government, we were monitoring only 7% of our waters. That number is 100% nowadays. And that is thanks to this government. We are monitoring, and this is the only country that monitors 100% of the waters. But not just that. What this government has done is introducing unlimited fines for water companies, but also unannounced inspections. We want our waters to be clean, but we have to be honest with people. To completely eradicate the sewage system, it will cost between 120 and 190 billion pounds. That means a lot of money.
But it's withdrawn a lot of funding from the Environment Agency, which means that spot checks
we
can't
have,
be done.
One of the things that we have asked water companies is to put investment on environmental projects. We have done that, yes. But we have to be honest, Nick, with households. If we want to eradicate the sewage system, it's going to cost between £4,000 to £7,000 to each family. And we are living on a cost of living crisis at the moment. People are struggling. We cannot put an extra pressure. So what we can do is increase monitoring, keep doing unannounced inspection to the water companies, fining them to a maximum level, and actually pressuring them to do environmental projects. That's what a successful government does. They don't put extra pressure on households who are already struggling.
There's another question here. What are we doing about the level of plastic in the Thames? Laura, pick up on these points, please.
Yes, definitely. So Thames Water is a really good example of why privatisation in terms of some goods does not work. Obviously, it was privatised under the Thatcher government, and because obviously Thames Water has a monopoly over our water system, it doesn't make any sense to privatise it. I read an article recently that showed about a third of the piping under Thames Water isn't even mapped. So how can you possibly maintain something you don't know where it is? It's quite astonishing. So yeah, we need severe fines for water companies which harm the environment and just don't work, and that's something that Labour will implement under its Great British Energy plans. And yeah, tackling plastic is a really, really important part. I'm sure Chaz will have a lot to say about that as well. Like I personally do all I can to reduce plastic waste using services like Oddbox, for example, to create like non-plastic fruit and veg, and it's something that I would champion in Parliament, definitely.
Sarah.
Liberal Democrats have been quite notorious in Parliament, actually, for raising this, the issue of sewage in rivers at every opportunity, because it's such a massive issue, and it is something that really, really distresses people. So we are really committed to seeing a solution to this problem. What needs to happen, first of all, is just a complete change to the way that water companies are regulated. And we're saying in our manifesto that we would scrap off what entirely. It was set up originally back in the 90s when water companies were privatised. It was set up just to ensure competition. But I think what's really obvious from the experience of the last 10 to 15 years is that we need a regulator that does so much more than that. It really does need to be providing a much greater scrutiny of water companies' financial health and operations. And above all, it really, really needs to make sure that water companies are maintaining environmental standards to the highest possible level. So we need a wholesale change to our regulatory environment. We would introduce much bigger fines to water company bosses if they were to allow sewage dumping, introduce a sewage tax. We need to demonstrate that this is something that we really, really take seriously. But we do need to boost our monitoring as well. I've spoken to a number of the organisations that run water sports clubs on the Thames, and they're really, really concerned because they can't be certain at any given time what the quality of the water is going to be like, and they really worry about the risk to the children and young people that they're putting out on the water, on paddleboards and kayaks and so on. Are they going to be safe? So we need much, much better real-time monitoring of the quality of our water. And just on plastic pollution, we would be looking at really boosting bottle return schemes and the ability to return any kind of packaging to the shop that you bought it in, and to get a much, much better system of recycling going on, and to really incentivize people to think about incentivize people to dispose of their packaging properly and give them means to do it.
Okay, 6 or 7 minutes to run. Now the question which has been hanging over this right through for the last hour and a half, Hammersmith Bridge. Sarah, I'm going to come to you because you've been very active, certainly dealing with Hammersmith Council and also with the Department of State. Do you want to update us and indeed tell us where you think you as a candidate could have any impact, given your frustrations in your weekly newsletter about how difficult it is getting information from anyone?
Yeah, I mean, basically that's it. One of the incredibly disempowering things for Richmond is that we aren't stakeholders in what happens to the bridge. It's owned by Hammersmith and Fulham. Transport for London have sort of strategic authority. Department for Transport ultimately are the only people who have sufficient funds to fix it. So we're really kind of locked out of the decision making, and that's incredibly frustrating for me and for everybody here, not just in Barnes, but Easheen, Mortlake, all the way down to Richmond, across to Putney, and everyone who is living with the impact of the congestion that's resulting from the closure.
And that comes through in a lot of questions, let me tell you.
I'm sure it does, I'm sure it does. So where we're at the moment, it's obviously been closed now for over 5 years to vehicle traffic. And that's because the bridge is simply in a parlous state of repair. It simply can't support motor traffic going over it. Hammersmith and Fulham Council are responsible for its upkeep and its maintenance. They don't have the funds to fix it. But where we're at the moment is that they have put together a business plan to generate the funds to repair the bridge, and it's been sat on the desk of the Department for Transport for nearly 2 years now. And I am asking repeatedly what the Department for Transport plans to do about it, whether they're going to take Hammersmith and Fulham's plan forward. And every single time I ask, I get told that they're still considering it. I haven't seen the business plan myself. I don't know how big it is. I don't know how long it takes to read. I don't know how complicated it is. But so I am convinced that the Conservative government have just been playing for time on this. Now, there's no doubt it's going to cost about 250 million to fix, up from 130 million, which was the original estimate back in 2019. So the costs are just mounting day after day. And that's before you've even done an assessment of what the economic cost of having an entire river crossing inaccessible to motor vehicles would be. So, I just hope, and I will be knocking on the door of the new Transport Secretary, whoever it is, on day one of the next Parliament, say, tell me what you're going to do with Hammersmith Bridge, because, I think it's the uncertainty as much as anything else. If a decision had been made years ago that perhaps they weren't going to go forward with the repairs, that would, that's obviously a decision I would have fought very hard against, because I think that, there continues to be an economic case for reopening the bridge, even at the current cost. But, at least there would have been some certainty. It's this foot dragging, this failure to make a decision, and I tell you what, last time we had a general election, December 2019, Conservative politician after Conservative politician came to stand at the Barnes end of the bridge, had themselves filmed saying, we're going to get this bridge open. Utter failure. So all I can say is in the next Parliament, this remains top of my priority list to get fixed and sorted for local people, and I will just keep knocking at any door that might deliver a solution to this.
Of course, there are many views about emissions and air pollution and privately driven journeys making up to 75%. We can't go into all of that at the moment. But Laura, say hypothetically that there were to be a new government in 2 weeks' time with a new Transport Secretary, and the new MP, one of you, then goes to the Transport Secretary and says on day one, what are you going to do about Hammersmith Bridge? What do you think the answer will be?
Well, Rachel Reeves has already said that she will work with Sadiq Khan to finally get this bridge open. As Sarah said,
going to fund it?
We need.
Yeah, we gave 6.6. Sorry. Yeah, we gave 6.6 billion to TfL in transport, and we gave an additional 10 million to stabilise the bridge. And why has Sadiq Khan not done that?
The Sadiq Khan. So first of all, this bridge, as Sarah said, will cost more than that money.
250 million.
Exactly.
Over 6.6 billion for TfL.
Sadiq Khan has already supported plans for the Department for Transport to reopen this bridge. He's already said he'd work with any government to open it. It's the government that's been dragging its feet on this.
It's a Labour-run council.
It's the government that's been dragging their feet on this, and the government actually even told one of our activists that if there was Susan Hall was to win the mayoral elections, then maybe they'd open the bridge like they're holding it hostage. It's absolutely outrageous. This is something that's so important to people's lives in this area as well as many others.
Let me hear from Zara then, because we're running out of time.
I think we need to be honest with people. It is a Labour-run council that owns the bridge. It is their responsibility, and we have given to Sadiq Khan 6.6, the government, not me, the government has given to Sadiq Khan 6.6 billion pounds for TfL, for Transport of London, an additional 10 million, and the bridge is still closed. I live in Barnes. I have to go on the other side every day. I've got friends of mine. I've got children that have to go to school and attend schools on the other side. I've got people in this constituency, people in Barnes that have to go and do doctor's appointments. We are completely cut out. It has become a political football, as you see, and this has to be about people and not politics. The truth is, and also, Sarah, I just want to ask you this. You keep speaking about the fact that you have been cut out of discussions and everything, but why have you not hosted, as the MP for Richmond Park, an opening discussion with the director of the Department of Transport, like Zach did when we had the whole issue with the Southwest trains? He managed to get him here and have an open discussion with us. Why have you not done that and ask him why we're not doing it?
Can I just ask, what has happened to the task force? What's happened to the task force?
Ask Gareth Roberts. He was sitting on the task force,
The task force was founded by the Transport Minister, and it hasn't met for 3 years.
The leader of your council had
a member of the task force, but he's not the leader of the task force. It was set up by the Department for Transport, and it hasn't met for 3 years.
Our leader of the council had a seat on the task force. So I am going to have to ask you, what has been done there Because I am not the
Richmond
MP,
Council
Sarah.
are not the
I
owner
will
of the
tell you
bridge,
what I
they're
would
not the
do
strategic
if I
controller
am
of the bridge,
MP.
they're not the Department for Transport, they don't have the funds to fix the bridge. The task force was set up by the Department for Transport, it hasn't met for 3 years.
The task force set up a division in between 1/3 that had to be paid by government, which the government committed to, 1/3 from TfL and 1/3 from Fulham and Hammersmith Council.
So why are
The
you saying it's
problem
the
is-
responsibility of the leader of Richmond Council?
No, I didn't say that. I said
just
ask.
did.
No, I
You
said
literally
ask
just
the
did.
leader of the council what happened because he had a seat there. No, Sarah.
Yes, no, he has been waiting for
Well-
3 years for
Well,
another meeting
but
to
you,
be held.
you are the leader. You are the MP, and he's the leader of the council. You're here asking me, as somebody who lives in Barnes, to vote for you when in 5 years, everything I keep saying on your leaflet, and I do like them to be honest, is how many things you have been calling for, how many things you have been standing for, but what have you actually achieved? Why should I be voting for you when Hammersmith Bridge is still closed? I'm not the MP. I would love to, and I would love to do something about it.
Can I just say, I think it's clear that Conservatives and Liberal Democrats can't get the bridge open. We need a Labour Party government to get this bridge open.
Right, I'm now going to bring it more or less to a close.
Can I have a chance to talk?
You can
please?
have a chance to talk.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Laura. Yeah, ding dong. Well, nothing's happening. And I also think that climate and emissions are important here. I think it is time to talk about climate, about the bridge. There are other ideas, there are other options available, and I think people should know about them, and they should have the chance to think about them. There's a campaigning group called Possible, which has put together an alternative vision, and it doesn't cost 250 million, I can tell you that. It's about 6 million to get a working option with some public transport solutions, walking and cycling. So there are other options that people need to have a look at to see about different ways of looking at this potential solution, a solution for the future, not just a solution that kind of goes backwards in climate terms.
Can I, just before we close, an important question, rather somber. Please, can the candidates outline their views on the question of assisted dying and suicide? If there's a free vote in the next Parliament, would they vote for a proposal similar to the one put forward by Lord Falconer in 2015 to allow terminally ill, mentally competent adults to have an assisted death after being approved by 2 doctors? A quick answer, please, Laura.
I believe in dignity in death, definitely. I think it's a difficult subject. We need to make sure that vulnerable people are protected. But I think that our inability to talk about death in this country, because it's so stigmatized, is not helpful. And ultimately, yes, I believe that we should be talking about what measurements we can take to have dignity in dying.
Chaz.
Well, yes, if it's their clear and settled will, yes, we support a humane, I'm reading actually from the manifesto, we support a humane and dignified approach to terminal illness, allowing people to choose to end their lives to avoid prolonging unnecessary suffering, if this is their clear and settled will. Sarah Olney.
Liberal Democrats are committed to a free vote on this issue in the next Parliament. I'm persuaded that this issue needs to be debated fully. I think one of the things I've become very aware of, there's lots of different views about this and lots of different aspects to consider. So I would be scrutinising any proposed legislation very carefully and making sure that all of the different objections or concerns that have been raised about it have been properly considered and properly addressed in the legislation. I think on the whole, I probably would vote for it, but every time I speak to people about this issue, there are new aspects to consider. So it is complicated. I think it's not necessarily easy just to say a yes or no answer, but the legislation would have to be really carefully scrutinised.
Sarah.
Well, as someone who grew up in a country that didn't have choices, I believe in choices. So if, as Sarah was saying, it is a very difficult position, and I think it will be very difficult for a government to translate it into law, and it should be scrutinized. But I do believe that people need to make choices. And if we've got the right system behind it, I think that's the right thing to go.
All right, well, look, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. We've had an enormous number of questions, some of which, an enormous number, how many? 49 questions about Ukraine, about foreign policy and so on. You can see the difficulty of getting it into an hour and 45 minutes. The pragmatic questions left at the end are, how do you propose to make yourself available to constituents should you be elected? For example, will you commit to running regular surgeries around your constituency? As a local MP, in order to understand and address our local issues, can you confirm that you live in the constituency?
Yes.
Barnes.
Laura?
I'm currently trying to buy my first house, so I've rented all over London for over 10 years, and if I were to become the MP, I would live here immediately, definitely.
And an indication of just how passionate life can be on some streets here during this election. Here's a question, I don't expect an answer, Sarah. Why are Liberal Democrats so aggressive towards Conservative voters? I have huge Lib Dem posters opposite me, but I'm terrified of putting up my own in response.
I hope that's not directed at me personally. I can't
No, not
think
at all.
I've ever been aggressive towards that.
But it shows the kind of emotions there are on some streets. And I just put...
If anyone's got any problems of that kind, I'd really like to hear about it. I'm slightly
I can't give you a name.
It's
It's an anonymous observation.
Fair enough.
Can I just ask that the same question I asked at the beginning? How many of you have actually changed your view while you've been here for the last hour and 3/4?
1, 2, 3.
All right, a few. I'm not going to put any number on it. I told you you'd have 1 minute each at the end to summarize your view. Laura.
I just didn't realise we'd have 1 minute, so let me just...
Well, who has realised?
I have now realised, yes.
Literally a minute.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's been really great to speak with you all. Please do email me if you have any other questions. I'm trying to get through all the emails. I think it's important that your candidates do that. And my email address is widely available online. I believe in a politics that puts public services first and creates the future that we need in order for the most amount of people to thrive in this country. That's exactly what Labour will deliver. We need change in this country desperately, and that's what you should vote for if that's what you believe in as well. Vote for change and vote Labour. Thank you very much for coming today.
Chaz.
Of course there are multiple topics that we haven't touched upon this evening, like Gaza, international relations, not sure what that was. The Green Party stands for a sustainable future. It stands for hope for the future. It stands for dealing with difficult issues like climate. The people who are members of the Green Party, like me, who've become members of the Green Party, have then stood for election, have become a Green councillor, do it from conviction. We do it because we believe in what we're standing for, and we think that that makes us a bit different from other parties. We think that that is why you should vote for us, and why if you think that the climate emergency is important enough, then you need to vote Green.
Sarah?
Well, I am madly in love with this constituency. This is where I live, this is where I'm raising my children, this is where my family is, and I'm not going anywhere even after the election. So regardless of what happens, I will be here, I will be in this community, I will be seeing you at the bar, at the cafe, or I would actually love to work with Sarah at some point and give my contribution if she wants me to. This is about people, it is not about politics. And I think if we step back for a second and think that there are more things that unifies us, that divides us, and we remember that and we hold into it, and we somehow create a stable, peaceful, and lasting economy and country. So that's why I would be incredibly passionate, and it would be the honor of my life to represent Richmond Park and the Richmond values on the green benches.
Sarah.
Unless the polls are historically and unprecedentedly wrong, we are expecting a Labour government, I think, on July the 5th. But here in Richmond Park, in this constituency, your choice will be between a Conservative MP or a Liberal Democrat MP. Conservative Party, which has destroyed public services, increased the cost of living and brought the economy to its knees, or a Liberal Democrat who will fight to undo the damage that we've done. Either way, the damage that's been done. Either way, it will be an opposition MP representing Richmond Park, and you've got the choice between a Conservative, who will be a member of a party that was just going to collapse into chaos and infighting, or a Liberal Democrat Party that knows what it stands for and will take its increased representation forward and really fight for the values that it cares about. We've provided opposition to a Labour government before. We fought them on Iraq, on ID cards, on 40-day detention, while the Conservative Party just sat on their hands. So vote Liberal Democrat in Richmond Park for real representation, for a local MP who will really fight for you. Thank you.
Can I thank you very much indeed? We arrived when the sun was up. The sun is now down. The football is over. Thank you for your stamina. I admire all of you as well. There are drinks at the back. So thank you very much indeed for coming. And I hope it has clarified for you the kind of choices you will need to make on the 4th of July.
Thank you.
He did. He did, yeah.